Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
One hot button issue these days, which sometimes tend to go under the radar screen because of so much else is happening, and also because Parliament decided to refer it to a joint parliamentary committee. In fact, that is one case in which the government accepted the opposition's demand and sent the new Waqf Bill, the text of the new Waqf Bill or the draft, to the joint parliamentary committee, which will now deliberate on it and come back with its recommendations. So to that extent, that can has been kicked down the road. Important thing, however, is that because of this, a whole lot of politics has broken out. Now we've seen, you've been watching these pictures from Shimla. That's about a mosque. There is Waqf issue involved there also. It wasn't a Waqf property, then became a Waqf property. It was something else, devolved to the Waqf board. All of that, we are not getting into that. We are talking about politics, and through politics about a very interesting personality. Because among the various people who've spoken, now many Muslim leaders have spoken up, many secular leaders have also spoken up, but secular leaders have been careful not to reject it outright, but to say that let this go to joint parliamentary committee, because there are genuine issues in the Waqf properties. There's a lot of them. It's a very old law. There is a lot of sort of legacy cholesterol in that situation, which needs to be cleaned up and for which a new act is needed. However, it's a controversial issue. So secular parties also are careful. They've said, send it to joint parliamentary committee. Let's look at everything so that everybody gets a fair deal and also Muslim interests are not compromised. That's the reason I'm calling them secular parties, because secular parties in India, usually the definition is those parties which expect to get any of the Muslim vote. That said, among the people who stood up and who's caused individually quite a stir with his intervention is Zakir Naik. Now, Zakir Naik is in exile. He lives in Malaysia. In India, he is a wanted man. India has served many red corner notices on Interpol, all of which Interpol has rejected over a period of 5 years, say about from 2016 to 2021, and even the Malaysian government, Mahathir, said earlier that he doesn't see the need to return him to India because he said that Zakir Naik tells him that he does not believe he will get justice for India, on which I shall tell you something as we go along. Zakir Naik, however, has popped up in headlines and quite a bit of discussion. If you see many of our TV channels, they've now been getting very angry with Zakir Naik. The fact is, he is in Malaysia. He is quite secure there at this moment. He wrote a tweet. So see this tweet. It's a detailed tweet in which he said that Indian Muslims have to protect Waqf properties and they have to reject the Waqf Amendment Bill. That's a call from him, like a clarion call from him. Now, he's somebody who has crores of followers, not just in India, but in many parts of the world, particularly among English-speaking followers, because he's an English-speaking tele-evangelist. A tele-evangelist of his kind is also unique because usually when you say tele-evangelist, you mean Christian tele-evangelists because they are the ones who do it. In this case, this is a jacket-wearing, suit-wearing, tie-wearing, English-speaking, trained doctor and MBBS tele-evangelist for Islam. But there also he does Islam in a very different way, very different from others, because he's not telling you so much about dogma, but he's giving you advice. He gives you advice on all kinds of things. Should a Muslim marry a Sikh girl? Should a child born out of wedlock get a share of the father's property? What to do about obesity? Can a Muslim sell wedding cards with photos of gods? Stuff like that. It's almost every day he has one question to answer in which he brings in his theory and his understanding of Islam, and he talks about other faiths as well. So he has spoken up, and that has got a lot of people irritated and upset and concerned. So among others, Kiran Rijiju, who's also our Minister for Minority Affairs. Rijiju said, for example, in his tweet, watch this tweet on your screen, please do not mislead the innocent Muslims from outside our country. India is a democratic country and people have the right to their own opinion. False propaganda will lead to wrong narratives. Then, very secular, very modern professor, academic as Irfan Habib, he has said that you don't get into it, you have none of your business. I'm paraphrasing him, you can see the tweet on your screens. He says that already, because of the way Indian democracy functions, it's a robust democracy, the bill has been sent to a joint parliamentary committee. So this is in going through the democratic process. So on both sides, on the BJP side as well as the genuine secular liberal Muslim side, there's been a pushback at him. However, he has a lot of followers. He's also been a thorn in the side of the Indian government, particularly this BJP government, because until the BJP came to power, he was doing all right. He was running his conventions. He had set up a TV channel of sorts, Peace TV it was called. He was also running a foundation, Islamic Research Foundation, which was raising a lot of money. It is BJP, however, which acted in 2016, banned his foundation, banned his funding, registered multiple cases against him and his foundation, cases under UAPA. I'm not even counting many of the IPC cases like 153, which is promoting enmity between communities. Those look like traffic offenses compared to what he was hit with under UAPA. So section 10, 13, 18 of UAPA. And you know, UAPA, once you get arrested, it takes a long time, if at all, for you to get bail. In October 26, 2017, he was also charge sheeted. That's because of the persistent Indian demand with Interpol for a red corner notice was being turned down, because one reason Interpol gave in the beginning was that there is no charge sheet against him. Charges against him included insulting Hindus, Christians, non-Wahhabi Muslims, very important, non-Wahhabi Muslims, particularly Shias, followers of the Sufi Islam, and also Barelvis. In fact, intersect rivalries and tensions within Islam. Islam is not a monolith. So these rivalries and also the dogmatic belief that this set of beliefs or this interpretation of the faith is the correct one and all the rest are wrong. In fact, in some cases, some societies, some will be accused of apostasy, as Ahmadiyas are in Pakistan. However, let's not go there. The Government of India charge sheets, NIA charge sheets, listed 9 shows and interviews of Zakir Naik, which they found objectionable. They also said that he was holding 10-day peace conferences under his Islamic Research Foundation in India between 2007 and 11, where he was exhorting non-Muslims to convert to Islam. And then there were a couple of statements that he made about Lord Ganesha, about Ganpati, which were taken out of IRF's Islamic Research Foundation's Facebook page and also used by NIA in its charge sheets. One in which he said, if God can't recognize his own son, how can he be God? And second, if you can prove to me that Ganesha is God, I will eat prasad. So these were seen as provocative statements by him. And then Enforcement Directorate, as usually happens, once there is a criminal case registered, Enforcement Directorate moves in. So they moved in and they raised questions about some 49 crores of contributions that he had received, and they said that these were monies lying in his UAE accounts, which he transferred to his personal accounts. Now, how did this action suddenly start? Because all this while, he was sitting in Bombay. I met him in Bombay. In fact, in 2009, I recorded a Walk the Talk episode with him. All of this happened. He came in focus, Indian focus and international focus, and ultimately left India and went into exile in good time. Otherwise, he'd be in jail. Because on 1st of July 2016, does the date ring a bell? That is the date on which the Holy Artisan Bakery, which was the hangout of the expats, the upper crust, the modern, young, trendy people in Dhaka, that was attacked by terrorists. What was seen to be Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorists, Bangladesh government said these were terrorists from Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh, JMB, which is affiliated to Al-Qaeda. However, ISIS claimed quote-unquote, credit for these attacks. This was a very big attack. It led to the killing of more than 20 people. It turned out that some of these terrorists had been followers of Zakir Naik or had been fans of Zakir Naik. And that is what increased the concern level about him. I will tell you in a minute what Zakir Naik said about this. But this is what persuaded him to leave India and go to a safer place and ultimately landed up in Malaysia. Meanwhile, government of India started making efforts to extradite him or at least have a red corner notice issued against him. So first outreach to Interpol, May 2017. In December, Interpol rejected it, saying there was no charge sheet. 3rd June 2018, NIA again went to Interpol asking for a red corner notice against Zakir Naik. Because now, by the end of 2017, a charge sheet had been filed, but they said no. On 19th of January, they said no. In July 2021, Interpol again rejected a demand by NIA for the issue of a red corner notice against Zakir Naik, saying that we can't issue red corner notices against religious figures and be still seen to be acting in neutrality in view of the varying positions that various national entities take on these figures. Yet another RCN red corner notice was rejected after that, and that red corner notice said that he had to be extradited. His crime was that he was asking for donations in his speeches, and that was a kind of money laundering. Once again, Interpol said they do not see that as money laundering. Now, what did Anwar Ibrahim say on this? Anwar Ibrahim has spoken about this. He said, exact quote from him, when he was asked if Narendra Modi raised the issue of Zakir Naik's extradition with him this time, he said, not now, much earlier. But then he also went on to say, this is not about one person. I am talking about the sentiment of extremism, of a compelling case and evidence that suggests to the atrocities committed by a group, faction or parties. And I go on to quote him, and I quote, we will not condone terrorism. We have been tough and we have been working together with India on many of these issues against terrorism. Talking to the Hindu earlier, however, Ibrahim had been more forthright and he said we need more evidence of guilt, and if we get that evidence, we will not tolerate any terrorist activity. Now, Zakir Naik himself, after the Holy Artisan Bakery attacks, he was asked by various people that how come your name is coming up? These boys are saying that they are your followers and they are influenced by you. So I quote from an interview that he gave to Indian Express in 2016, where he said, and I quote from that interview, and this is in quote marks, by using the name Islamic State, we are condemning Islam, because he is a critic of Islamic State. By using the name Islamic State, we are condemning Islam. They are the anti-Islamic state of Iraq and Syria that has killed innocent foreigners. By the way, he's also been very vocal in his criticism of 9/11 as well as 26/11 in Mumbai. At the same time, he says that he will not call Osama bin Laden a terrorist or a good guy, just as he said in that interview with me on Walk the Talk. He will also not call Sadhvi Pragya a terrorist or an innocent person until the trial is over. He says, I go by evidence. So both 9/11 and 26/11 were terrible acts. They were anti-Islamic. No real Muslim could have done that, etc., etc. Entirely condemnable, but I shall not call. He shall not call. I don't want someone to take out 20 seconds of this video and say, Shekhar Gupta said, I shall not call Osama bin Laden a terrorist. He said that he will not call Osama bin Laden a terrorist unless he gets more evidence. Why were then these boys following him, and why were they fans of him, and why did they say they liked him or they were influenced by him? He said, not surprised, I'm not surprised. The largest number of my followers, he said in this Indian Express interview, the largest number of my followers are in Bangladesh. In fact, in Bangladesh, he said 90% people would know me. I mean, 90%, 92% is about the total Muslim population in Bangladesh. So he said 90% people in Bangladesh would know me. 50% would say they are my fans. And in Bangladesh, all the leaders, all kinds of people, influencers, they will all know me, and 50% would say they are my fans. So if these three say they are my fans, it doesn't mean that I am party to their crime. And then he goes on to say, am I shocked the attackers knew me? No, right? And he leaves it there. Then he goes on to ask, sort of rhetorically, am I shocked the attackers knew me? And then he answers it as part of the same rhetoric, no. Now, how did I discover Zakir Naik? So, among my very good fellow editor friends is the well-known Pakistani commentator Khalid Ahmed, much senior to me, a very good writer and one of the very few genuinely secular, modern thinking people in the commentariat in the entire subcontinent. He had mentioned Zakir Naik's name to me much before I had heard of it. I did not even know someone called Zakir Naik until Khalid mentioned it. So Khalid was surprised that I didn't. This must have been a conversation sometime in early 2009 or 2008 at some Track 2 type conference. And Khalid Ahmed said Zakir Naik was rising as a significant Islamic tele-evangelist, not just in the subcontinent, but globally, as much of his discourse was in English. Watch his Peace TV closely, he said. Get to know this man. We will all hear a great deal more about him going ahead. He said he was impressed by his skilled rhetoric and rationalization of conservative dogma. I did go where everyone goes, to Hazrat Google, not my choice of the description, but someone else's, who we will talk about in a bit. And I started reading about Zakir Naik and watching his recorded speeches. It wasn't difficult to understand the point Khalid was making. So the MBBS degree holding, modern doctor turned tele-evangelist had emerged as the subcontinent's most significant, articulate and powerful spokesman for the conservative Saudi-style, Wahhabi-style Islam. His language, easy smiling manner, prolific quotations, chapter and verse from the Quran as well as Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads and the Bible, his inclination to take all questions at his congregations, even from Christians, Hindus and atheists, set him apart from the Maulana stereotype. He wore a suit and tie, spoke measured sentences in fast-paced English, and although his loose, relatively sparse beard and skull cap marked him out as a devout Muslim, little else in his demeanor did. I reached his people through one of my colleagues, and they welcomed the idea with some enthusiasm that he and I record an interview together, which we did in March 2009. Zakir Naik does not have an official or religious title. He objected on camera to being described as a Maulana or a Maulvi. The conversation, by and large, was not confrontational. The tone was mostly friendly. He engaged, and there wasn't much left to argue with when he praised and expressed his fullest faith in the Indian Constitution, Indian judiciary, exact quote from him, all including Muslims get justice sooner or later. That's the reason I said I will come to this point later, when he said that Mahathir said that he doesn't expect to get justice in India, because he had said in 2019 that he has full faith in Indian judiciary, and sooner or later everybody gets justice here, including the Muslims. So how did he say now? How is he saying now in Malaysia that he does not expect justice in India? His view on the partition, by the way, was no different from the RSS, a tragedy for the subcontinent. As one nation, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh would have been a global power from sport to economy. He said, most Muslims never needed or even asked for partition, he said. And many who led the campaign for Pakistan were not even practicing Muslims. He's referring to Jinnah, of course. Of course, unlike the RSS, he viewed it more from the angle of Muslims' interest. And I knew there is a background to conservative Muslims opposing partition, led by Jamaat-e-Islami. But his position in today's discourse would have been quite welcome and may only annoy most Pakistanis, where also he has a lot of followers. He referred to Lieutenant General S.K. Sinha as the governor of Jammu and Kashmir, asking him to use his wide influence in the state to calm things down. His view was what most of those who hate and demonize him would generally expect, that Kashmiris were fed up of both India and Pakistan and in a free vote would prefer to be left alone. But since that was not an option, it was for India to improve education, employment and peace on its side, and Kashmiris would be happy in that arrangement within India. Subtle problems arose in the conversation as we got to trickier issues. Some of these I spoke about earlier, how his condemnation of 6/11 and 9/11 was qualified, because he would not call Osama a terrorist. He wasn't sure that he was Osama bin Laden. Because I keep traveling, I get a lot of information, documentaries, 9/11, some even say it was an inside job, Bush government got it done, etc., etc., etc. So those conspiracy theories. Osama kind of equivocation underlines what is wrong and dangerous with him. Besides the ancient stupidities he repeatedly supports, like Islamic way of punishing your wife with light beatings as if with a toothbrush, or ruling that Muslim tombs as un-Islamic, his modern facade, quote of verse every 3 sentences rhetoric, represents a deep, conservative, scriptural view of Islam. And while his method looks non-threatening and sounds non-threatening and amiable, he is dangerous in how he can play with genuinely inquisitive, innocent minds. I do not believe he would ever advocate violence against other people or the state openly, and definitely will oppose ISIS as a conspiracy against Islam, but an innocent young Muslim mind could easily extrapolate his fundamentalist interpretations of Islam to justify the more extreme alternatives and methods. No surprise, therefore, that these Bangladeshi terrorists claim to be his followers. In fact, he says much else in his discourses on television, which is troublesome. For example, he says that Muslims have every right to treat non-Muslims under their control or who've submitted to their power as a kind of second-class citizens. The expression he uses is dhimmis, and he says Muslims then have to protect them, let them follow their religion, let them keep their places of worship, of course, for a charge. But otherwise, in conquest, if they defeat non-Muslims, they can do what they want with their places of worship. Those are problematic things about him. A question is often asked, why are so many new young terrorists, particularly those of the ISIS, well-educated, English-speaking and from prosperous families? In short, why does the new Muslim terrorist defy the old, poor, illiterate stereotype of Ajmal Kasab? The answer may lie in what Hyderabad MP Asaduddin Owaisi, who's another favorite hate figure of the Hindu right wing, once told me. He took me for a drive around the inner city of Hyderabad, which his family and his AIMIM have ruled for decades. He took me to see his educational institutions. At his medical college, I was pleasantly taken aback to find a 70:30 girl-to-boy ratio in his first year MBBS class and a woman teacher teaching the class with a microphone. So I happily posted some pictures on social media. It brought an avalanche of abuse, with most complaining about the fact that all the girls wore hijab. Ask those abusing you, Owaisi said, if they'd rather that these girls go to a madrasa instead of a medical college. And then he reflected, maybe it will be better if young Muslims also went to the madrasa. A Maulvi will tell them the meaning of Islam, its principles, even jihad. It will be better, he said, than when some young Muslims become engineers, doctors and MBAs, have no knowledge of their faith and are now curious. So where do you go but to Hazrat Google? Now remember I told you, I used that expression Hazrat Google and I said it wasn't mine. So he said they go to Hazrat Google. On Google he said when a young Muslim hits jihad, he is most likely, I'm quoting Owaisi, he is most likely to see Muhammad Hafiz Saeed and his Jamaatul Dawa at the top. This, he said, is the biggest challenge for Islam today. Sure enough, you may or may not agree with Owaisi. He is a polarizing figure. The question, however, remains, how do you deal with this phenomenon where young, educated Muslim professionals go to Google and even modern tele-evangelists, important, modern television evangelists to learn about their faith? Their minds are overwhelmed with the propaganda and Zakir Naik's kind of convincing story of Muslim victimhood. Then some self-styled secularists, including Congress leaders, not just Digvijay Singh, stoke that victimhood by calling everything from Ishrat Jahan encounter to Batla House a conspiracy against innocent Muslims. If this is how complex it is in India, you can imagine the situation in Pakistan and Bangladesh, and this assault on the minds of nearly 500 million, or indeed about 40% of the world's Muslims. That is the reason when I wrote a national interest article about Zakir Naik in 2016, I headlined it, "The Misinterpreter of Maladies."